I didn't want to go to Vietnam. Nobody I knew wanted to go. But in 1967, when you got your draft notice, you went. Simple as that. College deferment kept some guys out, but I couldn't afford college. Working class kid from Detroit, you didn't have many options. Basic training at Fort Benning, advanced infantry training. Then the flight to Saigon. 20 hours on a military transport, cramped and hot, everyone trying not to think about where we were headed. Some guys slept. Some played cards. I just stared out the window and wondered if I'd make it back. We landed in January 1968. The heat hit you like a physical force when they opened the plane doors. Humid, thick air that made it hard to breathe. And the smell, jet fuel, sweat, something else I couldn't identify. Later, I'd learned that was the smell of Vietnam. Death and jungle and fear all mixed together. They assigned me to the 1st Cavalry Division, stationed near Hugh, infantry grunt, lowest rank, hardest job. My platoon was a mix, guys from all over America, black and white, city kids and farm boys, all of us scared and trying not to show it. Sergeant Davis ran our platoon. He was on his 2nd tour, had been in country since '65. Hard man, but fair. He knew how to keep you alive if you listened to him. Keep your head down, follow orders, watch your buddies back. Do that, and you might go home. That was his philosophy. The war in early '68 was strange. We'd go on patrols through the jungle, sometimes making contact with the VC, sometimes not. It was guerrilla warfare, ambushes, booby traps, an enemy that could be anyone. The old woman selling fruit in the village could be VC. The kid asking for candy could be spotting for them. You couldn't trust anyone. We lost guys regularly. Not in big battles, just ones and twos. Martinez stepped on a punji stake, got infected, medevaxed out. Johnson got hit by sniper fire during a patrol. Williams triggered a booby trap. The war ground you down slowly, methodically, without big, dramatic moments. Just constant low-level terror and steady casualties. By late January, we'd been hearing rumors. Intelligence said something big was coming. The North Vietnamese army was moving troops south. Activity was increasing along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. But the brass kept saying we had them on the run, that the war was being won, that it was just a matter of time. I believed them. We all believed them. What else were we going to do? The alternative was thinking we were dying for nothing, and you can't function with that in your head. January 30th was the start of Tet, the Vietnamese Lunar New Year. Biggest holiday of the year. There was supposed to be a ceasefire, both sides observing the holiday. Command told us to stand down, that we'd have a few days of relative peace. We were in base camp near Hugh, cleaning weapons, writing letters home, trying to relax. Some guys played football, others just slept, catching up on rest they never got in the field. It felt almost normal, almost peaceful. I was writing a letter to my girlfriend back home, telling her I was fine, that the rumors about the war being bad were exaggerated, that I'd be home soon. All lies. But what else do you tell someone you love? The truth would just scare her. Hell, the truth scared me. Sergeant Davis was checking perimeter defenses even during the ceasefire. He didn't trust it. Most of us thought he was being paranoid. The VC always observed Tet. It was tradition, sacred. Even in war, some things were respected. We were wrong. Davis was right. Around 0300 hours on January 31st, the first rockets hit our base. I was asleep in my hooch when the explosion started. Thought I was dreaming at first. Then the second salvo hit and I was awake, scrambling for my gear, my weapon, trying to understand what was happening. The night sky was lit up with tracers, rockets, explosions, chaos everywhere. Men running, shouting, trying to organize a defense. The perimeter was being hit from multiple directions, sirens blaring, officers yelling. The crack of AK-47s mixing with the heavier sound of our M16. This wasn't a probe, wasn't a small attack. This was a full-scale assault, and it wasn't just our base. The radio chatter was frantic. Every major base in South Vietnam was under attack. Every city, every airfield. Saigon itself was being hit. Even the American embassy. It was coordinated, massive. The kind of offensive we'd been told the enemy wasn't capable of mounting. The kind of attack that meant everything we'd been told about winning the war was a lie. I grabbed my rifle and ran toward my position on the perimeter. Rockets were still coming in, mortar rounds. The enemy was out there in the darkness trying to overrun the base. All I could think was that I'd been in country for less than a month. Hadn't even learned everyone's names yet. And I was about to die in a war I didn't understand, in a country I couldn't find on a map 6 months ago. The Tet Offensive had begun. 50 cities and towns across South Vietnam, all hit simultaneously. 80,000 enemy troops all attacking at once. The largest military operation of the entire war. And we were right in the middle of it. The base perimeter was already breached in 2 places when I reached my position. VC sappers had cut through the wire, blown gaps in our defenses. Behind them came waves of NVA regulars, professional soldiers, not the guerrillas we were used to fighting. I dove into a fighting position next to a guy I barely knew. Thompson, maybe. Or Thomas. Didn't matter. We just started firing into the darkness at muzzle flashes, at shadows, at anything that moved. The noise was overwhelming. Not like the firefights in the jungle where you'd exchange shots for a few minutes, then it would go quiet. This was sustained combat. Rockets screaming in, mortars landing, machine guns chattering, grenades exploding, radio chatter mixing with screaming, all of it blending into one continuous roar. I fired until my first magazine was empty, reloaded, fired again. Couldn't tell if I was hitting anything. Just pointed toward the muzzle flashes and pulled the trigger. The M16 would jam sometimes. They always jammed, poorly designed piece of shit, and I'd have to clear it while bullets snapped past my head. An RPG hit the bunker 20 yards to my left. The explosion was massive, threw bodies into the air. I saw one man on fire, running, screaming. Then he fell and didn't get up. The guy next to me took a round, just slumped over without a sound. I glanced at him, dead, shot through the head, then kept firing. No time to think about it. No time to feel anything. Just survival. Just keep shooting. Flares went up, turning night into harsh white day for a few seconds. In that light, I could see them coming. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Black pajamas mixed with NVA regulars in khaki uniforms. They were organized, moving in squads, providing covering fire for each other. This wasn't some ragtag guerrilla attack. This was a real army. We called in artillery. The big guns from Firebase Bastogne started dropping shells beyond our perimeter. The impact shook the ground, threw up huge columns of dirt and fire. It slowed them down but didn't stop them. They kept coming. Gunships arrived around 0400. Cobras making gun runs. Their miniguns making that distinctive buzzsaw sound. Watching the tracers stream down from the sky, every 5th round a tracer, meaning 4 bullets you couldn't see for every one you could. The gunships broke up their assault, forced them back into the tree line, but they didn't leave, just pulled back and kept up the pressure. Mortars, rockets, sniper fire. They'd probe one section of perimeter. We'd reinforce it. Then they'd hit somewhere else, trying to find a weakness, trying to break through. Dawn came slowly. When the sun finally rose, I could see the devastation. The base was torn up, buildings burning, craters everywhere. Bodies, ours and theirs, scattered around the perimeter. Equipment destroyed. The place looked like it had been through a hurricane. But we'd held, barely. We'd taken casualties. Probably 20 or 30 dead, more wounded. But the base hadn't fallen. That was something. The problem was, the attack hadn't ended. They were still out there. We could see them moving in the tree line, setting up mortars, preparing for the next assault. And the radio reports coming in from across South Vietnam were horrifying. Hue City had fallen, the ancient capital, right up the road from us, overrun by NVA troops. They'd taken the citadel, raised their flag over it. Thousands of enemy soldiers occupying the city. Thousands of civilians trapped inside. Saigon was under attack. The American embassy had been breached. Later, we'd learn it was only the compound, not the building itself. But at the time, we thought they'd taken the whole thing. Other bases were reporting similar attacks to ours. Some had been overrun completely. The war we'd been told we were winning was suddenly very different. The enemy we'd been told was broken and demoralized had just launched the largest offensive of the war. Everything we'd believed, everything command had told us, was revealed as either lies or ignorance. Around 800, they hit us again. This time from the north side, where our defenses were weakest. I was ordered to move positions, reinforce that section. Ran across open ground while mortars fell around me. Pure luck I wasn't hit. Just pure luck. The fighting that day was constant. They'd attack. We'd beat them back. They'd mortar us. We'd call in airstrikes. Back and forth. Grinding. Exhausting. By noon, I'd gone through 6 magazines. My rifle barrel was so hot I'd burned my hand on it. I was covered in dirt and cordite residue and someone else's blood. Sergeant Davis found me around 1400. He'd been wounded, shrapnel in his leg, but was still on his feet, still leading. His face was gray with exhaustion and pain, but his voice was steady. They were organizing a reaction force to push into Hue, retake the city. 1st Cavalry was being called in. We were going. I'd been in combat for almost 12 hours straight, hadn't eaten, barely drank any water, was running on adrenaline and fear, and now they were sending us into Hue, into urban combat against an enemy that had just taken an entire city. We mounted up in APCs around 1600, armored personnel carriers, tracked vehicles that offered some protection but were still vulnerable to RPGs. 30 guys crammed into each one, hot and cramped and smelling of sweat and fear. The ride to Hue took maybe 30 minutes. We could see the smoke from miles away. Black columns rising into the sky. The city was burning. As we got closer, we started taking fire. Small arms at first, then RPGs. One APC in our convoy took a direct hit, just exploded. Everyone inside dead instantly. We dismounted outside the city and moved in on foot. The streets were a nightmare, rubble everywhere. Buildings collapsed or burning. Bodies, military and civilian, lying in the streets. The NVA had fortified every building, every corner, every alley. They'd had 2 days to dig in to prepare defenses. This wasn't going to be a quick fight. We made it maybe 2 blocks before we got pinned down. Machine gun fire from multiple positions. RPGs, snipers. We took cover behind a wall, tried to return fire, but couldn't see where it was coming from. Urban warfare. Every window was a potential threat. Every doorway could hide an enemy. Martinez was next to me. Kid from Texas, 19 years old, always talking about his girlfriend back home. An RPG hit the wall above us. The blast threw him backward. When the smoke cleared, he was gone. Just gone. Nothing left but pieces. I threw up. Right there in the street, while bullets cracked overhead, I vomited until there was nothing left. Then I wiped my mouth and kept fighting because what else was there to do? We fought for that street until dark. Gained maybe 50 yards. Lost 6 men doing it. When night fell, we pulled back to a defensive position in a building we'd cleared. Set up watches, tried to rest. I sat with my back against a wall, my rifle across my lap, and tried not to think about Martinez. About the guy who died next to me at the base. About all of it. But there was nothing else to think about. Nothing else was real anymore except the war, the death, the endless grinding terror of combat. This was just the 2nd day of Tet. We'd be fighting in Hugh for another month. Wouldn't know that at the time. Wouldn't know that we were at the start of the longest, bloodiest urban battle of the entire war. All I knew was that I was 19 years old, half a world from home, and I'd just watched friends die. And tomorrow I'd have to do it again, and the day after that, and however many days it took to retake this city, if I survived that long. The fighting in Hugh was unlike anything they'd trained us for. In the jungle, you could see maybe 20 yards through the vegetation. In the city, you could see for blocks, but every building was a fortress. Every street was a kill zone. The NVA had turned the ancient capital into a death trap. We fought house to house, room to room, sometimes floor to floor in the same building. The Marines were fighting on the south side of the Perfume River. We were on the north side, trying to reach the citadel. The progress was measured in yards per day, sometimes feet. The method was always the same. Suppress the building with machine gun fire. Move up with a squad. Blow the door or the wall. Throw in grenades. Rush in shooting. Clear each room. Then move to the next building and do it all again, over and over, building after building, block after block. And it was exhausting, not just physically, though that was bad enough, but mentally. The stress of knowing that every doorway could be your last. Every window could hide a sniper. Every pile of rubble could hide a mine or a booby trap. Your nerves stayed wound tight every second of every day until you thought you'd snap. We lost men constantly. Johnson took a burst from an AK while clearing a room. Williams stepped on a mine. Carter got hit by a sniper we never even saw. The replacements who came in to fill their spots would last days, sometimes hours. The city was eating us alive. The NVA weren't guerrillas here. They were professional soldiers, well-trained, well-equipped. They'd had time to prepare defenses, spider holes, interconnected tunnels, pre-sighted machine gun positions. They knew we were coming and they were ready, and they wouldn't surrender. In the jungle, you'd sometimes get VC who'd give up when they were cornered. Not in Hugh. They'd fight until they were dead, or we were dead. Every room was a potential firefight. Every building had to be taken by force. The civilians made it worse. Thousands of them still trapped in the city, hiding in basements, in ruins, wherever they could find shelter. You'd clear a building and find families huddled in the wreckage, old people, children, terrified. We'd try to get them out, send them to the rear, but sometimes they'd get caught in the crossfire anyway. One day we were clearing a house when we found a family in the cellar. Parents, 3 kids, grandparents. They'd been there for days without food or water. The children were crying. The adults just stared at us with dead eyes. We gave them water, called for an APC to evacuate them. While we were waiting, an RPG hit the house. The whole second floor collapsed. The family made it out. We lost 2 men. That kind of thing happened constantly. You'd try to do the right thing, try to help, and people would die anyway. The randomness of it was maddening. Why did that family survive when Martinez died? Why did the old woman we pulled from the rubble make it when Johnson didn't? There was no logic to it, no justice, just chaos. The weather turned bad in February. Rain, cold for Vietnam. The streets turned to mud. Everything was wet. Your uniform never dried. Your skin would crack and bleed. Infections were common. Jungle rot. Trench foot. If the NVA didn't kill you, the conditions might. We fought for 2 weeks straight without a break. No hot food, no showers. Just sea rations and water from our canteens and whatever sleep we could grab in bomb craters or ruined buildings. We stopped shaving, stopped caring about anything except the next building, the next street, staying alive until tomorrow. I watched men change during those weeks, saw them lose something essential, the humanity draining away, replaced by something mechanical. We became efficient killers, had to be. Hesitation meant death. Mercy meant death. You went into a room shooting and asked questions later if there was anyone left to ask. I killed people in Hue. Don't know how many. Lost count after the first week. Some at distance with my rifle. Some up close. So close I could see their faces. Young men like me. Older men. Once, I think, a woman, though in the smoke and chaos I couldn't be sure. I told myself they were all soldiers, all legitimate targets. Maybe they were. Maybe they weren't. Doesn't matter now. They're dead either way. The worst was the tunnels. The NVA had dug tunnels connecting different buildings, different parts of the city. You'd clear a building, think it was secure, then they'd pop up from underground and hit you from behind. We learned to check basements, to look for tunnel entrances, but we didn't always find them. I went down into one of those tunnels once. Volunteered because someone had to, and I was tired of watching other people take the risks. It was pitch black, narrow, claustrophobic. I crawled through with my rifle in front of me and a flashlight, expecting to run into NVA at any second. Found nothing. Just an empty tunnel that led to an abandoned building. But the terror of those few minutes crawling through the darkness, knowing I could die at any second with no room to fight back, that stayed with me. By mid-February, we'd pushed the NVA back block by block. The citadel was still in their hands, but we were getting closer. The fighting was as intense as ever, but we could see progress. Could see that we were winning, slowly, painfully, expensively, but winning. The reporters started showing up then, journalists with cameras trying to cover the battle. They'd follow us for a few hours, get their footage or their photos, then disappear back to the safety of the rear. They'd ask us questions. How's it going? What's it like? Do you think we're winning? What were we supposed to say? That it was hell? That we were dying for every foot of ground? That the city was being destroyed to save it? They couldn't understand. They weren't there, not really. They'd visit for a few hours, then leave. We lived there, bled there, died there. One reporter asked me if I thought the war was justified. If all this death was worth it. I just stared at him. What kind of question was that? Worth it? I'd watched friends die, had killed people, had seen civilians caught in the crossfire, had seen an entire city reduced to rubble. Worth it? I didn't answer him, just turned and walked away. He probably thought I was being difficult. Didn't care. He'd write his story, show his pictures, then go back to his comfortable hotel. I'd still be here, still fighting, still trying to survive. By late February, after almost a month of continuous combat, we finally took the citadel. The NVA flag came down. The South Vietnamese flag went up. Victory, they called it. We'd retaken Hue. The cost was staggering. Over 200 Americans dead. Thousands of South Vietnamese troops killed. Enemy casualties in the thousands. And the civilians, estimates ranged from hundreds to thousands dead. The city was destroyed. Beautiful, ancient Hue, the cultural heart of Vietnam, was rubble and ashes. We'd won, technically. Retaken the city. Defeated the NVA attack. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. Like we'd endured something terrible and come out the other side damaged but breathing. They pulled us out in early March, sent us back to base camp for rest and refit. We'd been in combat for over a month straight. Lost more than half our company. The survivors were exhausted, hollow-eyed, moving like old men. I'd been in Vietnam for 2 months. Felt like 2 years. The kid who'd landed in January, scared, but still believing in the mission, still thinking we were the good guys, he was gone. What was left was something else. Something that had seen too much, done too much, lost too much. The Tet Offensive would continue for weeks more in other parts of Vietnam. But for me, for our unit, Hue was the worst of it, the bloodiest, the most brutal. The fight that broke something inside all of us that could never be repaired. We'd survived, but we'd never really leave that city. Never really escape those streets, those buildings, those tunnels. Part of us would always be there, fighting house to house, watching friends die, killing to stay alive. Hugh would haunt us forever. The rest period after Hugh lasted 2 weeks. They called it rest, but you can't rest from what we'd been through. Not really. We were pulled back to base camp, given hot food and showers, told to recover. But the combat didn't leave us. We carried it with us. I couldn't sleep. None of us could. The second you closed your eyes, you were back in those streets, back in those buildings, clearing rooms, throwing grenades, seeing faces you'd killed, seeing friends who'd died. The nightmares were worse than being awake, so most of us just stayed awake. Sat around, smoked, stared at nothing. The replacements arrived in those 2 weeks. Fresh meat, we called them. Kids straight from the States, still believing what they'd been told about the war, still thinking they were going to be heroes. We looked at them and saw ourselves 2 months ago, naive, innocent, doomed. We didn't talk to them much. What was the point? They'd either learn fast or they'd die. Words wouldn't change that. Some of the guys tried to give advice. Keep your head down, trust your instincts, don't volunteer for anything. But mostly we just ignored them. It was easier that way, easier than learning their names just to watch them die a week later. Sergeant Davis was different after Hugh, quieter. He'd always been hard but fair, demanding but caring about his men. After Hugh, something in him had shut down. He gave orders mechanically, didn't check on people, didn't offer the little encouragements that had kept us going. He just existed, going through the motions, waiting for whatever came next. I understood. We'd all shut down in different ways. Had to keep functioning. You couldn't feel everything and still do the job. So you felt nothing. Better to be numb than to be consumed by what you'd seen and done. The news from back home started filtering in during those weeks. Protests, demonstrations. People in the streets saying the war was wrong, that we shouldn't be there. The Tet Offensive had been broadcast on television. Americans had watched their embassy being attacked, had seen the fighting in Hugh, had seen the casualties mounting. Public opinion was turning. Walter Cronkite himself said the war was unwinnable. If America's most trusted newsman was saying it, people were listening. President Johnson announced he wouldn't run for re-election. The war had broken his presidency like it was breaking all of us. We didn't know what to think about the protests. Part of me understood. The war was a mess. We were dying for reasons nobody could adequately explain, and the end was nowhere in sight. But another part was angry. We were here, doing what our country asked, and people back home were calling us baby killers, calling us murderers, spitting on the flag we were dying for. It added another layer to the whole thing. Not only were we fighting an enemy we couldn't always identify in a war with no clear objectives, but the people back home were turning against us. We were expendable, disposable, sent to die in a jungle on the other side of the world while America debated whether we should even be there. Made you wonder what you were fighting for. Couldn't be for freedom. The South Vietnamese government was as corrupt and authoritarian as the North. Couldn't be to stop communism. We'd kill 100 VC and 100 more would take their place. Couldn't be for glory. There was no glory here, just death and mud and trauma. So what was it for? Most of us stopped asking that question. You couldn't function if you thought too hard about the meaninglessness of it all. So you just focused on the immediate. Survive today. Help your buddies survive today. Tomorrow could worry about itself. They sent us back to the field in late March. Different area away from Hugh, but same war. Back to patrols through the jungle. Back to searching villages. Back to the constant low-level terror of guerrilla warfare. The first patrol was strange. After the intensity of urban combat, the jungle fighting seemed almost manageable. Just us against the forest, against an enemy we couldn't see. No buildings to clear, No civilians in the crossfire, just pure combat, if you could call anything about Vietnam pure. We made contact the third day out. Ambush. Classic VC tactics. Wait until we were strung out on a trail, then open fire from concealed positions. The new guys panicked, fired wildly, wasted ammunition. The veterans just hit the ground and returned fire methodically, aimed shots at muzzle flashes. We beat them off. Lost one man. One of the new guys, forgot his name if I ever knew it. The VC disappeared into the jungle like ghosts. We called in artillery on their last known position, but probably just killed trees. That's how it went in Vietnam. They'd hit us, we'd hit back, they'd vanish. No territory taken, no clear victory, just casualties and frustration. The months after Tet blurred together. More patrols, more ambushes, more casualties. The Tet offensive had officially ended, but the war continued. Different tactics, different battles, but same brutality, same pointlessness. I'd been extended. My original tour was supposed to end in December 1968, but they'd extended everyone who'd served during Tet. Needed experienced soldiers. Couldn't afford to lose us yet. So instead of going home, I stayed. Kept fighting. Kept surviving while others died. By summer, I'd been in country for 6 months. That made me a veteran by Vietnam standards. Most guys didn't last that long. You either got killed, got wounded badly enough to be evacuated, or you lost your mind. I was none of those things, so I kept going. Sergeant Davis got killed in July, sniper, single shot through the head. He was walking point, doing what he'd always told us never to do, but did anyway because he wouldn't ask his men to take risks he wouldn't take himself. 1 second he was there, next he was dead. No last words, no dramatic moment. Just there, then gone. His death hit me harder than I expected. I'd thought I was numb to it by then, thought I'd seen so much death that one more wouldn't matter. But Davis had been there from the beginning, had kept me alive through Tet, had been the closest thing to stability in the chaos. And now he was gone. They made me a sergeant after that, said I had the experience, had proven myself in combat, gave me my own squad. Suddenly I was responsible for 8 other lives, had to make the decisions, had to be the one who told people to do dangerous things, had to be the one who wrote letters home when they didn't come back. I didn't want it. Told them I wasn't ready. They said nobody was ever ready, that you just did the job because someone had to. So I did the job. Tried to be like Davis had been, firm but fair, careful but decisive, trying to keep my guys alive while still accomplishing the mission. It was impossible. The war didn't allow for that kind of success. You'd do everything right and people would still die. You'd make the best decision possible, and it would still be wrong. The war made corpses of us all, one way or another. By fall, I'd lost count of the friends who'd died. The faces blurred together. The names escaped me. I could remember Hugh clearly. Every building, every street, every moment of terror. But the individual deaths, they ran together into one long, continuous loss that never ended. I stopped writing home. What was I going to say? The truth would destroy them. The lies felt obscene. So I just stopped. Let them wonder. Let them imagine I was fine, that I was being a soldier, that everything had meaning. Better than telling them their son had become something they wouldn't recognize, something that killed without thinking, that felt nothing, that had forgotten what normal life even felt like. The war stretched ahead of me with no end in sight. My extension would be up eventually. I'd go home eventually. But I couldn't imagine it anymore. Couldn't picture what that life would be like. Home seemed like something from a dream, something that had happened to someone else. Vietnam was real. The war was real. Everything else was just noise. I'd become what the war needed me to be. Efficient, mechanical, dead inside in all the ways that mattered. Still breathing, still fighting, but not really alive, just surviving, just waiting for the bullet or the mine or the rocket that would finally end it. That's what Tet had done to us. Not just Hugh, but all of it. The offensive had shown us the truth, that we couldn't win this war, that all the deaths were for nothing, that we were just prolonging the inevitable. And once you knew that, once you really understood it, you couldn't unknow it. We kept fighting anyway, because orders were orders, because your buddies needed you, because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant feeling, and feeling meant breaking completely. So we kept going, kept patrolling, kept fighting, kept dying, one day at a time, one firefight at a time, until our tour was up, or we were dead, or the war finally ended, whichever came first. My breaking point came in October 1968, 9 months after Tet began. Not during the fighting, not during any of the moments when death was closest. It came during a routine patrol in a village that didn't even have a name on our maps. We were searching for weapons caches, for VC, for anything that justified our presence there. Standard operation. We'd done it 100 times. Village looked like every other village. Thatched huts, rice paddies, water buffalo, old women and children watching us with those blank, unreadable faces. My squad was spread out, searching huts one by one. I was checking a hooch when I found the family inside. Old man, maybe 60, his wife, 2 grandchildren, couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 years old. They were huddled in the corner, terrified. I'd seen that fear before, seen it in Hugh, in dozens of villages, in the eyes of every civilian we encountered. They were scared of us. The Americans, the ones who were supposed to be liberating them. The old man was shaking, hands up, trying to show he wasn't a threat. The children were crying silently, faces pressed against their grandmother. And I was standing there with my rifle pointed at them, just another armed stranger invading their home. Something shifted in that moment, like a switch flipping. I saw myself through their eyes, saw what I'd become. A foreign soldier with a gun, searching their home, terrifying their family, part of a war that had destroyed their country. I wasn't a liberator. I was an occupier, an invader. And for what? What were we accomplishing? This family wasn't VC. These children weren't the enemy. But we'd stormed into their home with weapons, treating them like threats, because that's what the war had taught us. Everyone was a potential enemy. Every village was hostile territory. Trust nothing. Suspect everyone. I lowered my rifle, stepped back. The old man's eyes followed me, still terrified. I wanted to tell him I was sorry. Sorry for scaring his grandchildren. Sorry for being in his country. Sorry for the war that had torn his world apart. But I didn't speak Vietnamese, and apologies wouldn't change anything anyway. I walked out of that hooch, and something was different. The weight I'd been carrying, the deaths, the killing, the horror of Tet, it all crashed down at once. I'd been holding it back for 9 months, keeping it at bay by staying numb, by not thinking, by just surviving. But seeing those children's faces, seeing that old man's fear, it broke through. I sat down outside the village, just sat down in the dirt. My hands started shaking, couldn't stop them. One of my guys asked if I was okay. I didn't answer, couldn't answer. My breathing got shallow, fast. Panic attack, though I didn't know that term then. Just knew something was breaking inside me. Everything I'd done, everyone I'd killed, all the horror I'd witnessed and participated in, it all came flooding back. Martinez blown apart by the RPG. The family in the farmhouse. The civilians caught in crossfire. The enemy soldiers I'd killed up close enough to see them as people. The children crying, the burning buildings, the bodies, the endless bodies. What was it all for? Why had Martinez died? Why had Sergeant Davis died? Why had thousands of Americans and Vietnamese died? For this. for terrified families and destroyed villages and a war with no end. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't function. My squad was staring at me. The new lieutenant, we'd gone through 3 lieutenants since Davis died, was asking what was wrong. I just shook my head. They called for a medevac, said I'd had a breakdown, combat fatigue, shell shock, whatever label made sense. They flew me back to base, then to a hospital in Da Nang. Doctors asked questions. I answered some, ignored others. They diagnosed acute stress reaction, said I needed rest, medication, time away from the field. But you can't rest from knowledge, can't take a pill that makes you unknow what you know. The war was wrong. We were wrong. All of it was wrong. And I'd been part of it, had killed for it, had lost friends for it, for nothing. The hospital was full of guys like me. Physical wounds, mental wounds, both. Guys who'd been broken by the war in ways that medicine couldn't fix. We'd sit in the day room, smoking, staring at nothing. Sometimes someone would start crying and nobody would react. Sometimes someone would start screaming and orderlies would sedate them. Mostly we just sat in silence, each alone with what we'd seen and done. I was there for 3 weeks. They said I was improving, that the medication was helping. They were lying or stupid or both. I wasn't improving. I was just learning to hide it better. Learning to say what they wanted to hear so they'd leave me alone. They offered to send me home early. Medical discharge. I'd done my time, more than my time. Survived Tet, been wounded, done my duty. I could go home with honor. I said no, don't know why. Maybe because home felt impossible. How do you go back to normal life after this? How do you work a regular job, have regular conversations, pretend that the world makes sense when you know the truth about what humans do to each other? Or maybe I said no because my squad was still out there, still fighting, still dying. Walking away felt like betrayal, like I'd be abandoning them the way America was abandoning all of us. They sent me back to the field in November. Different unit, not my old squad. Fresh start, they said. As if a fresh start was possible. As if I could forget everything and be a soldier again. I went through the motions, followed orders, did the patrols. But something fundamental had broken. The part of me that could function on autopilot, that could fight without thinking, that could kill without feeling, it was gone. Now I felt everything, saw everything, questioned everything. Made me a liability. A soldier who hesitates gets people killed. A leader who questions orders undermines the mission. I knew this, tried to hide it, tried to be what they needed. But you can't fake that kind of thing. Not in combat. Not when lives depend on split-second decisions. They pulled me out of the field after 2 weeks. Not officially, just found reasons to keep me on base. Perimeter guard, supply duty, make-work jobs that kept me away from actual combat. Everyone knew what it meant. I'd broken, was used up, no good to them anymore. December came, my original tour date. They let me go home this time. Honorable discharge, combat ribbons, Purple Heart for the wound in Hue, all the official recognition of service. Paperwork said I'd served with distinction. Paperwork didn't say I'd had a breakdown. Didn't say I'd lost faith in the mission. Didn't say I'd become a liability. Just said I'd completed my tour and was returning home. The flight back to the States was full of guys heading home. Some were celebrating, drinking, excited to see families. Others were quiet, lost in their own thoughts. I was somewhere in between. Relieved to be leaving Vietnam, but terrified of what came next. Because Vietnam had broken something in me that I knew couldn't be fixed. The war had shown me truths about humanity, about America, about myself that I couldn't unknow. And I was going back to a country that didn't want to hear those truths, that would call me a hero or a baby killer, but wouldn't understand that I was just a kid who'd been sent to fight in a war that made no sense and had paid the price for it. I was going home, but the person I'd been before Vietnam, the kid from Detroit who'd been drafted in 1967, he wasn't coming back. He'd died somewhere in the streets of Hue, or in a nameless village, or in that hospital in Da Nang. What was coming home was just a shell, just a ghost wearing my face, going through the motions of living without really being alive, carrying Vietnam inside me like a disease, like a wound that would never heal. I'd survived Tet, survived the war, but survival wasn't victory. It was just a different kind of death. I landed in San Francisco in December 1968. No parade, no welcome home. Just processed through the base, changed into civilian clothes, and walked out into America like nothing had happened. The airport was full of protesters. They had signs about the war, about Nixon, about bringing the troops home. Some of them saw my short hair, my military posture, figured out what I was. One girl spit at me, called me a baby killer. Others joined in, shouting, accusing. I just kept walking, couldn't even be angry. She wasn't wrong, really. I had killed. Maybe not babies, but I'd killed people, plenty of them. The moral distinction didn't seem to matter much. Got on a bus to Detroit, sat in the back, stared out the window at America sliding past. Everything looked the same. The buildings, the cars, the people going about their normal lives. Like Vietnam didn't exist. Like guys weren't dying there right now while Americans shopped and worked and complained about traffic. My parents picked me up at the bus station. My mother cried. My father shook my hand with that same firm grip, same understanding in his eyes. He'd fought in World War II, had his own demons. He knew something of what I was carrying. They took me home. My old room was exactly as I'd left it. High school trophies, posters on the wall, a life frozen in 1967, waiting for someone who no longer existed to come back and live it. I tried. God, I tried. Got a job at a factory, showed up on time, did the work, came home, ate dinner with my parents, watched television. All the normal things normal people do. But I wasn't normal anymore. Wasn't sure I'd ever be normal again. The nightmares started immediately. Every night I was back in Hue, back in those streets, those buildings, clearing rooms, throwing grenades, watching Martinez die, watching Sergeant Davis die. The old man's terrified face in that village, the children crying, all of it mixing together into one long, continuous horror that played every time I closed my eyes. I'd wake up screaming, thrashing. Once I woke up with my hands around my own throat. My mother heard me from downstairs, started sleeping with her door closed. Easier for both of us that way. Loud noises were impossible. A car backfiring and I'd hit the ground, hands over my head, waiting for incoming. 4th of July was torture. The fireworks sounded too much like mortars, like rockets. I'd lock myself in my room until it was over, trying to block out the sounds that brought me back to Vietnam. I couldn't be around crowds. Too many people, too much chaos. I'd start to panic, feel like I was back in the city, surrounded by threats I couldn't identify. Would have to leave, get somewhere open, somewhere I could breathe. People thought I was strange, rude. They didn't understand that crowds meant danger, meant ambushes, meant death. Dating was impossible. How do you explain to a girl why you can't watch war movies? Why you flinch at loud noises? Why you wake up screaming? You can't. So you don't date. You stay alone. Easier that way. The VA offered help, therapy, support groups. I went to a few sessions, sat in a room with other Vietnam vets, all of us damaged in similar ways. We'd share stories, talk about the nightmares, the flashbacks, the inability to adjust. It helped, knowing I wasn't alone. but it didn't fix anything. Couldn't fix what was fundamentally broken. They had a name for it now. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Like putting a label on it made it real, made it treatable. But a name doesn't change what it is. Doesn't change that Vietnam lives inside me, that I carry those streets and those deaths and that horror with me every day. I started drinking. Not heavily at first, just enough to dull the edges. Enough to make sleep possible, even if that sleep brought nightmares. But it escalated. Few beers became a six-pack. Six-pack became a bottle. Anything to stop thinking, to stop remembering, to stop feeling. My father understood. He'd done the same after his war. He tried to talk to me about it, tried to help. But his war had been different. World War II made sense. Clear enemy, clear objectives, clear victory. You could come home from that with some sense of purpose, some belief that it mattered. Vietnam made no sense. We'd lost or would lose soon enough. All those deaths, all that suffering for nothing. The South would fall. The communists would win. Everything we'd fought for would be erased. Martinez and Davis and all the others died for absolutely nothing. That knowledge was the worst part. Not the nightmares or the flashbacks or the inability to function, but knowing that it was all meaningless, that we'd been lied to, sent to die in a jungle for a cause that was already lost, that our government had sacrificed us for political reasons that had nothing to do with freedom or democracy or any of the noble words they used to justify it. I lost my job in 1971. Showed up drunk too many times. Couldn't concentrate. Couldn't maintain the facade of normalcy anymore. They let me go. Couldn't blame them. I wasn't reliable. Wasn't functional. Was barely holding myself together. Moved through a series of jobs after that. None lasted long. Factory work, construction, whatever would hire a veteran with no skills except killing. Each job ended the same way. Fired for drinking, for unreliability, for being unable to maintain the pretense of being a normal person. By the mid-70s, I was living alone in a cheap apartment. Alienated from my family, no friends, no job, surviving on disability payments from the VA. This wasn't the life I'd imagined at 18, wasn't the future I'd dreamed about. But dreams died in Vietnam. Futures died there. The only thing that survived was the past, endlessly replaying, never letting go. I watched the fall of Saigon on television in 1975. Helicopters evacuating from the embassy roof. South Vietnamese trying desperately to escape. The North Vietnamese taking the city. The war ending in defeat and chaos. All of it for nothing. Every death, every wound, every moment of suffering. For nothing. The outcome we'd spent years and tens of thousands of lives trying to prevent had happened anyway. We'd just delayed the inevitable while destroying ourselves in the process. I threw the bottle at the television, watched it shatter, sat in the broken glass and cried for the first time since coming home. Cried for Martinez, for Davis, for all the guys who died thinking it meant something, for the civilians who got caught in the middle, for the country we'd destroyed trying to save it, for myself, for what I'd become, for the life I'd lost in those jungles and cities. The years that followed blurred together. More drinking, more jobs lost. Brief periods of sobriety followed by longer periods of drunken oblivion. The VA tried to help. Therapy, medication, programs. Nothing stuck, nothing worked. How do you treat a wound that's spiritual? How do you heal someone who's not just damaged, but fundamentally changed by what they've experienced? I'm 68 years old now. 50 years since Tet. Half a century carrying these memories, these scars. Most of the guys from my unit are dead. Some died in Vietnam. Others came home and killed themselves. A few drank themselves to death. The ones still alive are as broken as I am, living half-lives, surviving but not really living. The nightmares never stopped. I still dream about Hugh every night, still see Martinez's body, still see Davis fall, still see that old man's terrified face, still hear the children crying. The doctors said it would get better with time. They were wrong. Time doesn't heal trauma. It just gives you more years to carry it. People thank me for my service sometimes. When they learn I'm a Vietnam vet, some of them, the younger ones mostly, they shake my hand, say they appreciate what I did. I nod and say thank you because that's what you're supposed to do. But inside I feel nothing, no pride, no satisfaction, just the weight of all those deaths, all that wasted life, all that meaningless suffering. They built a memorial in Washington, the Wall, they call it. Names of all the dead carved into black granite. I've never been, can't. The thought of seeing Martinez's name, Davis's name, all those names, it's too much. They're already carved into me. I don't need a wall to remember them. Vietnam defined my life in ways I couldn't have imagined at 18. It took everything. My youth, my innocence, my faith in America, my ability to be happy. It took the person I might have become and replaced him with this broken shell who moves through life without really living. The Tet Offensive was supposed to be the enemy's last gasp, a desperate gamble that failed militarily but succeeded politically. It turned American opinion against the war, started the process that would eventually lead to withdrawal and defeat. But for those of us who fought in it, who survived Hugh and the other battles, Tet was something else. It was the moment we realized the truth, that we couldn't win, that we were dying for nothing, that everything we'd been told was a lie. That knowledge destroyed us as surely as the bullets and bombs. Because you can survive combat, can survive physical wounds, but you can't survive the realization that it was all meaningless, that your friends died for nothing, that you killed for nothing, that you were sacrificed on the altar of political expediency by leaders who didn't care about you. I survived the Tet Offensive, survived Hugh, came home, been breathing for 50 years since then. But I died in Vietnam, died in those streets, in those buildings, in that moment in the village when I finally understood what we were doing. The body came home, but the person I was, the person I might have been, he stayed there. Still there now, still fighting, still dying, over and over, every night, forever. They called us Vietnam veterans, treated us like we were special, different from other soldiers. They were right. We were different. We fought in a war nobody wanted, for reasons nobody understood, and came home to a country that blamed us for it. We lost the war, but more than that, the war lost us, destroyed us, took our futures and left us with nothing but memories of horror and the knowledge that it was all for nothing. 50 years later, I'm still trying to understand it. Still trying to make sense of why Martinez had to die, why Davis had to die, why any of it had to happen. I don't have answers, just questions that echo through the decades, just memories that won't fade, just pain that time can't heal. Vietnam took everything from me, and the worst part is I'm one of the lucky ones. I survived.